it really is about building a community toolbox of different tips and different insights. And because I think the reality is we we need medical professional resources. Those are essential to be out there, but we also need, more qualitative tips from just normal people that struggle. And so, for me, kind of the three things that I share are, first and foremost, share and share often. Be as open about your story and your struggle, as you can be. And the second one is connect with your people, passions, and experiences, from your life. And then the last one, the title of the book, "Don't Effing Kill Yourself," is also a mantra. It also can be used as a mantra.
Welcome to Onward Live, a live stream focused on encouraging you to create a life you love living now. Let's go beyond success to significance. Being clear on our why is crucial. It requires doing the inner work, finding ourselves, getting to know ourselves, embracing our inner child, shedding social conditioning, and letting go of perfect. We know obstacles make us stronger. We can dream big and take action. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. I invite you to tune in every week and engage with me and my inspiring guests. Invite your friends. Let's make time for what matters most in our lives. Let's move onward together. Hi, everybody. I was just kind of cracking up because I saw that one of the last pictures, and it's of my grandson, Marshall. He's like 5, and you know how it is when a 5-year-old doesn't want to be in the picture, and he's like looking all kind of stressed out. We're trying to say, smile. But that doesn't always work with little kids. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight and my guest. I appreciate you guys for joining. And I wanted to start this episode first with talking a little bit about Ukraine, and it's just very short. There's a website there where you can make a donation. So I got this email from Restream. Restream, the head of Restream. Restream is this platform that I'm using right now to stream this show, because you can't stream directly. You can't just go live on LinkedIn. You need to have something that you can stream. So I got this email. It said, "My name's Alex, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Restream. I'm also a father, a husband, and above all, today, a proud Ukrainian." He sent this Friday, February 25th. As you likely already know, yesterday, Russian forces conducted airstrikes across Ukraine, and including his hometown, where Andrew, a friend of his, and he founded Restream in 2015. So in the last 24 hours, he said in this email, they'd received an outpouring of support from friends, colleagues, and many inquiring about the safety of their team and ways they can help. So basically, they got everybody from their team out of Ukraine, or is at least safe. And they have a website, which I'm sharing right here, that you can go to. And there's a lot of organizations that are on the ground in Ukraine that you can donate to. So I just wanted to share that as we kick off. So tonight we're talking about a tough topic. So if you get triggered by the conversation on suicide, I just wanted to let you know up front that that's what we're talking about: mental health, suicide, and just wanted to let you know up front in case it might trigger you. So the topic tonight is I don't know how to say this, Jeff. Don't effing kill yourself. A memoir of suicide, survival, and stories that keep us alive. And my guest tonight is Jeff Romig. Hi, Jeff. Thank you for
Hey,
joining
Emily,
me.
thank you for having me.
Yeah,
And yeah, the title I usually just go with however the host wants to say it.
Well,
So
every my episode is clean, so I guess that's how I'll say, don't effing kill yourself. A
yeah.
memoir of suicide, survival, and stories that keep us alive. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why
Yeah.
you wrote this book?
Yeah, for sure. The title isn't just intended to be an eye catcher. It's actually a story. About 10 years ago, a friend asked me if I could only say one more thing to my dad, what would I say? And the title of my book was my answer. And my dad died by suicide on February 24th, 1996. I was 18, just turned 18 a few weeks before. And so I've been a suicide survivor from the loss of a loved one, for 26 years now. But I also inherited the same mental health struggles that he had, or that I believe he had. He wasn't diagnosed, he didn't seek help, but based on his final act and the insights we have from the letters he left us, and my own struggles, I believe he struggled with the same things. And that's, for me, I'm diagnosed generalized anxiety and clinical depression. And then, I have my own suicidal ideation. And so I decided to write the book for a couple of reasons. I think first and foremost, to share my story as as a kid who lost a parent to suicide, to give insight to that, but then also, insight to what does it look like when you leave a kid behind and they grow up? And then the other side, to give insight into, what is it like to be, from my standpoint, I can only tell my story, a pretty high functioning younger professional for most of my life to date in the professional world. I'm 44, so most of my time in the workforce was kind of young professional. But how I've navigated my own mind, it's, our LinkedIn profiles don't convey whatever we deal with from a mental health standpoint, from a trauma standpoint. And so it's, we want our work to jump out and to say something about us, but it's also what's in between the lines on our resume that make us who we are. And navigating the pressure of the young professional world. And it's part of my story, and part of my 30s was a lot of trying to prove myself, because I couldn't prove myself to my dad, and it wasn't healthy for me. And it played into a lot of everything, tracing back to not only his suicide, but growing up too. So I had the idea for the book a few years back, but I definitely needed to live a little more life, and got sober in 2017. And I'm now over 4 years sober. And it really was the tools that I found through AA based sobriety that positioned me to even be able to do this, because it's not just a writing project. It's a really an emotional project. And so it took a lot out of me. But I decided on Father's Day in 2020, as we were a few months into the pandemic. I'm single, divorced a few years ago in 2015, and live alone. And on Father's Day, that was my 25th fatherless Father's Day. And I just thought, as I'm in isolation, how do I keep myself healthy, and and do a project that I've wanted to do. And I think also somebody on some endless Zoom call had said something like, if you're a writer and you don't come out of quarantine with a book, what were you doing? And so sort of all of those things together, and this is my first book, but sort of all of those things together, come as I was coming up on the 25th anniversary, it just really landed in my head that, I have this story I want to tell to help people who struggle with suicidal ideation as a core reader, and then sort of the next group, people who love those people, and how to have some insight and have some tools. And just, started writing. The way I approach the book kind of plays with time. It's not told in a linear fashion. It's one of the original ideas was, I was very haunted by, my dad did the carbon monoxide in the car thing, and I was haunted by, it takes based on my research, it takes about 5 minutes, depending on the concentration of the carbon monoxide, to lose consciousness. And so I was always haunted by, like, what was he thinking in those 5 minutes, and why wasn't it enough to change his mind? And then you combining that idea with the idea that our lives flash before our eyes when we're about to die. And and I thought about, what did he see, but also what would I see? And so basically the book is my memoir, and is each chapter is based around a date, and then there's a story arc, but the dates are not in chronological order.
Understand. Yeah.
They jump around, and and not all of them are. I mean, it's a memoir. It's not a self-help book, so all of them aren't darkness. And what I found as I was writing, one of my first editors kept asking me, brilliant guy, kept asking me, why are you telling me this specific story? And I was so annoyed with the question at first, but then it really, that question helped me frame not only the approach to the book, but the key tool from the book, which is, these are the people, passions, and experiences that have brought me joy. And in my darkest moments, in my very darkest, almost close to suicide moment in 2017, it was remembering those things and the possibilities that existed that pulled me through that moment. And so, these are the stories that I want to remember because they bring me joy, or because they bring me perspective, because they remind me of the people that love me and that want me to stay here. And so that's what the book is a memoir of suicide, survival, and the stories that keep us alive.
Let me ask, so congratulations, Bill says, and I do
Thank
too,
you.
on your sobriety.
Thank you.
That's about as long as my son's been sober too. And
Awesome.
I,
Congratulations to him.
yeah, and thank you. And I've seen, well, for him, I say thank you. I've seen him grow and heal through what he learned when he was, getting sober. And so it sounds like writing this book was healing for you as well.
Absolutely. No
Yeah.
question about it. I mean, that to the degree that the ending of the book changed because of my growth through the process.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think it's, one thing I discovered is I'd done a lot of grief work from a few angles, but I hadn't really done trauma work. And they're two different journeys.
Mhm.
And, you know, and so I felt like, you know, before I started the book, I felt like, it's been 25 years almost. I should be in a better place. But I hadn't even done any of the work with the trauma.
Yeah.
I had done the work with the grief. And so this book really helped me navigate the trauma, and again, see my dad as a guy that was struggling. I mean, I turned 44 just a few weeks ago in February. I was 43 when I wrote the book. He was 47 when he died.
Yeah,
And
there you go.
so
And you can
it's,
relate a little differently now
yeah,
that you're older, right? You can see him not as
exactly.
just a dad. He's a person. He had thoughts too. He's not a
Absolutely.
perfect person. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think about, like, I was diagnosed in 2002. So I've had a diagnosis and, therapy most of that time, meds most of that time, and it's still been a struggle. I can't imagine
You didn't
what
have that,
he
right?
what he dealt with having none of that. And so, there's a different kind of perspective and a different kind of empathy, and I think, from a sobriety standpoint, and not seeing everything as being about me. I think for so long it was just all about me, and I was the victim. And but the more that I've learned about, his life, he might have been a victim too. And it just, he was trying to do his best. He wasn't trying to victimize anyone. He was just upside down in his head, because the reality is, the longer that suicidal ideation stays in your head, the more poisonous it gets. And so that's
Oh, wow.
why, and that's why I have to, that's why I'm encouraging people to share more, and I'm sharing my story in depth. And then I have the podcast Suicide Survival Stories, to give opportunities for other folks to share their story as
How
well.
does sharing the story help you? And
You
does
know,
sharing the story keep you from suicide?
yes, because I'm here, and I don't say that in a glib way, but
Uh-huh.
I think it is. It's just like, it's like if your cup fills up, and it's going to overflow if it keeps filling. And that's sort of how it is with suicidal ideation. the more in your head you are without both hearing yourself out loud and potentially, hearing another person reflect back to you about what you've said, you can just get upside down and you can think, it's like a pilot flying with instruments, and the instruments are telling him one thing, and then he comes in for landing and he's flying upside down because the instruments are off. And when I read my dad's suicide letter, because he talks about finances, and that was his, that was what he said, and to him it was all very logical, and this is how he could take care of his family, and he wasn't correct. It wasn't a good idea, but to him it was logical because he didn't bounce it off anybody else, and he
Yeah.
didn't even hear himself say it out loud. And I doubt, until he sat down to write those letters, he ever put anything on paper, because he wasn't one. He was a lawyer, but he wasn't one to journal or talk about his feelings or anything like that. So
Right.
I don't think those thoughts ever came out of his mind until he was literally had decided what he was doing and was checking off his list of what he needed to do, to leave.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I have a younger brother. He's about to turn 40. He was 13, or I guess he was 12, about to turn 13, and he was in 8th grade. I was a senior in high school. And
Wow.
so, yeah, he's a literal rocket scientist now. He does wind turbine work for General Electric. I got all the humanities, history, political science, writing, and he got all the math and science. So
That's funny. That's funny. So, there was a question that I had right at the top of my head, which is like, so when you get in that state where you're just thinking about it, how do you get yourself out of it? What are your steps?
yeah, I mean, my steps now are, I mean, I think if I'm being honest about my own suicidal ideation, where I've come through the process of writing the book is I have learned how not to die, but I'm still learning how to live, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
so I definitely find myself in these spaces when my depression is kind of winning, where I feel worthless and hopeless, but I'm not suicidal. And that doesn't mean that I don't think about suicide in general. There's a difference between, and I think that's something that people who have suicidal ideation, like, there's a difference to having suicidal ideation and being suicidal.
Different.
And I mean, the difference is you're formalizing a plan. I mean, when you're suicidal, you're you're on your way to the act, as opposed to envisioning the act in a theoretical way.
Taking action on it.
Right.
Mhm.
And so I have not been suicidal since I got sober. And so, my program, and then my commitment to sharing about my story, my mental health journey, my own suicidal ideation, keeps me from getting to that darkest place. So it's the work to not get there. It's the mowing the lawn, weeding the garden, the maintenance, the mental health maintenance has kept me from getting to that point. But that's also different for everybody. And
Yeah.
so that's where, I try to share what works for me. And if it works, I'm not sharing it as a panacea or as a silver bullet. I'm just sharing it as sharing sort of the three things I talk about that you can add to your own toolbox. And, but they're not, you know, everything. And they work for me right now, but maybe in a year I need another tool. Right. And
It's
so,
interesting that I didn't plan this, but last week my guest was a mom who lost her son 12 years ago to suicide
I'm so
in
sorry for
March.
him.
And then I have you, and it wasn't even planned. And then this week or within this past week, was the week when the Stanford soccer player
Yeah. I
did
read about her.
suicide. And One of the things that I learned from last week's interview is that suicides tend to happen the most in the spring, which I didn't
Oh,
know. I thought it
interesting.
would be like winter time, but it's in the
Yeah,
spring.
I didn't know that either.
And she said that's because I mean, I don't know exactly why, but she said, yeah, it's like March, April, May, June, that time frame is when most of them happen. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I just would have thought it would have been winter. How
Yeah.
do you handle it when you hear in the news, you know, like the soccer player? How does that impact you?
I will answer that question from a pre-book and a post-book standpoint. Pre-book, I took those opportunities to share and to speak. Post-book, I have not. I don't want it to ever seem like I'm trying to capitalize on those opportunities to sell a book, because I'm absolutely not. I didn't do this in any fashion to make any money, and so it's not about that for me. But I think it's so I think now my role is to share in between,
Hmm.
and when there's a tragedy that involves suicide, it will be shared and people will share a little more. And I feel like my duty now is to share in between at moments when you know
Maybe
it's
it's
just
not on the forefront of people's
right.
minds, whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
exactly.
here's a
So
question.
that's
Yeah.
how I've dealt with that. Yeah.
Okay. Mark says, how good is society at recognizing the symptom before people get to the point? Like, I know one of the things
Terrible.
I learned last week is, you can ask, are you thinking of committing suicide? That's a question that we should ask, right?
Yeah.
Don't
And we want
avoid
to
that.
say, and just a note, we want to say die by suicide
Try by.
rather than commit, because commit implies that you're in the midst of a crime, which obviously murder suicides are, but suicide isn't a crime, and so we don't want to criminalize people who die by suicide. So we've in the community we've tried to move more toward die by suicide. So not to be
No,
a
I'm glad you
critic, but
pointed that out.
just to
I'm
bring
glad.
that up.
Yeah, but I mean, that would to
Yeah.
me would be like an awkward question to ask somebody. Are you thinking about dying by suicide?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I think the answer to the question, the one word answer is terrible. Society does a terrible job. But I think, but it's such a mix of things. And again, it's a toolbox. It's not a silver bullet. I mean, even when people are like, reach out to your people if you're struggling, that's really hard. When you're paralyzed by depression, it's really hard to reach out. But on the other end of that, like, when it comes down to it, if you are planning and in the act of taking your own life, you are more than likely alone, and if you're going to get through it, it's it's your own wherewithal at that point. So it's like when people say, you know, if you're struggling, reach out. I mean, it sort of goes both ways. It's like, it's incumbent upon me when I'm struggling to try to push myself to reach out, but it's also incumbent upon people who care about me, who know that I struggle, to not get disconnected, because, you know, my depression backs me into a corner where it's safer for me to isolate. And so sometimes I need to find the strength to reach out, and other times having people reach out to me reminds me that, people care about me, and it's easy when you're isolating to tell yourself that they don't. So it sort of goes, those are both tools, right? Like, it's a yes and. Like, I need to reach out, and people who know I struggle, if they haven't heard from me in a while, or I post something on social that they're concerned about, like, you know, they should reach out. So it's a yes and. It's not one or the other.
That's a really
Um,
good point because I mean, I'll just say, you started off with saying that a lot of times our social media posts don't reveal everything. I've been connected to some people on LinkedIn that are really sharing some deep
mhm.
experiences. I haven't shared as many, but I will share that I do get depressed. And I tend to get depressed when I like leave my when not leave my comfort, when I go on a trip. So I was on a trip and I was around a lot of people. I had to speak an event and I came home and I just, when I get out of my routine, and that weekend I slept just about the whole weekend. This is just a few weeks ago. And it felt like two hands were on my shoulders keeping me down. I went out because I had to take my dog out to pee because I had to do that.
Mhm.
But reaching out for help when you feel like that, or to just talk to somebody, you don't feel like talking to anybody.
Yeah.
So, like you said, when they say reach out for help, when you're feeling like that, it's very hard to reach out for help. And what's somebody gonna say? Oh, kind of snap out of it. Come on, let's
Yeah.
go do something. If you haven't felt like that depression or that weight on your shoulders, and I haven't felt this, thinking about suicide, I haven't been there. But if you haven't been there, it's really hard to understand.
Yeah. And that brings to the next piece of like, why don't people reach out? Because they're not necessarily, they don't necessarily feel capable of what they might of dealing with what they might hear, you know? And I think that's the other thing. When we reach out, we have to make sure that we're very intentional about not making it about us as the one that's reaching out. So I say that from the perspective of the friend, not, if I reach out to somebody and they're struggling, I need to make sure that I don't make it about me and that I let them navigate it, and only all I can do is remind them that I care and that I'm there. And if they don't want to talk any more than that, I can't do anything. I had that exact situation with a friend this past weekend who's struggling, and he knows that I struggle, and we were together, and I said, because he took a leave and is to tackle what he's struggling with, and I said, I'm always here to talk, whatever you need, and you know he's not ready to be in that place. And so, but I hope he knows now that, like, maybe he'll remember that more, and maybe he'll text me or whatever. But I hope that I reinforced to him that I care, and that's, that he's not alone, because
Right.
again, we can't. And I think that, again, this is another sobriety thing. Like, we don't try to get other people sober. If people want to get sober, they have to want to get sober. And no matter what we think we should do, it's not, it's not going to work until someone is coming on their own merits. And it's
I'm
similar,
smiling
right?
because I learned that with my son because
Yeah.
I tried to do everything to help him, and it wasn't until he decided.
Yeah. And it's similar. And the more that we can, as friends or family, the more that we can approach mental health with that, we're not trying to fix you or save you. We just love you and care about you, and are here for whatever you need. And when you need it, you know we're here. And that's, so I try to approach that the same way I try to approach sobriety resources. If a friend calls and says, because I'm very open about my story and my sobriety, and so I've had friends reach out to me that have said, I don't know that I want to go to AA, and I don't know that I'm an alcoholic, but I feel like I'm drinking too much. And I basically say, I'm here to talk. If you want resources, I can share them. Because again, it's not my decision to decide if somebody is or isn't an alcoholic. I mean,
Right.
that is only them. That is, as an alcoholic, nobody can tell me I am or that I'm not, and but I had to decide that I didn't want to keep on that path and make that change. And I know that the resources are there for me. I think it's harder to a degree with depression because it's hidden in a lot of ways. And but I think the best way to be empathetic is to make sure that you're not making it about you, and make sure that you're just, you know, doing what you can and letting them know that you care.
That's
Um,
great tips. James said that it took getting CO poisoning for him to wake and see life. Thanks for sharing that, James. And we have a couple other comments here. Let's see. Mark Lee says, sometimes friends who are in hard times want you to talk to them and encourage them to live. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think you have to follow their energy, right? Like if they're in a, and so if they're going to give you the openings to proceed. And so you just kind of have to take it step by step and, listen to your own intuition about how you feel in that moment but even the act of engaging them shows them that you want them to be alive.
Yeah. And Mark says that disconnection is something we have to work on. It's easy to separate yourself from your friends and allies. And then he has a question for you. Has media sometimes over romanticized depression? One of the biggest holiday specials is It's a Wonderful Life. And that's really about suicide.
That's a good question. I don't know that I have a good answer to it. I think the reality is there's two very distinct type of depressions. There's depression that's acute and situational, and then there's depression that's clinical and chronic. And so I don't think whatever the media does or doesn't do, as a former journalist and as a member of the media, a past member of the media, I don't think what they do or don't do has any effect on chronic depression. But it certainly could have an effect on situational depression. Absolutely, for sure.
And Andrew says, I hear you. I was there too. I hope it's okay that I share this as it might help someone too. I created a video on how to overcome negative thinking, depression, or suicidal thoughts, and it includes the 7 reasons not to kill yourself too. And it's hard for me. Let's see. I'd have to unhide this to show the whole. It's hard for me to see the whole message here, but he's got it in the comments. Yeah, here it is. It includes the 7 reasons not to kill yourself too. It'll show you the way, the first step, and others that helped him get out of the trap. So anyway,
that's great. And thank you, Andrew. And again, I think it really is about building a community toolbox of different tips and different insights. And because I think the reality is we need medical professional resources. Those are essential to be out there, but we also need, more qualitative tips from just normal people that struggle. And so, for me, kind of the three things that I share are, first and foremost, share and share often. Be as open about your story and your struggle, as you can be. And the second one is connect with your people, passions, and experiences, from your life. And then the last one, the title of the book, Don't Effing Kill Yourself, is also a mantra. It also can be used as a mantra of, I've tried the first 2 things, and if I've done those and I'm still spinning, it's a mantra to say. Again, it's not a panacea, but I think it's, I hope that it can go in a community toolbox with other things that might connect.
Mark says, Andrew, sure, Emily would like to share your story. I interviewed Andrew already, but we didn't talk about what he just posted. And his episode's out, and I am going to be posting about it tomorrow. I hadn't told you yet, Andrew, that your episode came out as a regular podcast. But so, when you scheduled this interview, my podcast theme was facing adversity, moving forward, and discovering ourselves along the way. And you could probably see that I've changed the theme a little bit to create a life you love living. So how do you live so that you love your life? Or can you? Do you?
I can. I'm learning. I think, the book was such a journey, and, I wrote it in about 5 months, and it was a lot of emotional work. The rest of the time before it came out was editing and design and all that stuff. But I think I'm still learning, and even it came out in November, and I also needed to kind of catch my breath from that. And, I'm a nonprofit fundraiser, and I used to be a political consultant, and I left my most recent nonprofit fundraising job to go to a startup political firm and do some strategic communications last fall, and it wasn't a fit. And I think part of getting healthier, through sobriety and through the process of the book, allowed me to say, like, it's not a fit. I'm gonna move on. And so the last few months, for the first time in a very privileged professional life, where I've moved seamlessly for 20 plus years from opportunity to opportunity, I was doing a full job search and not employed. And that was, I have made work so much a part of my life. My sponsor tells me, and has told me for 3 years, like, you make work your higher power. You let your life revolve around work, and you put so much of your self-worth into that. And as I was going through this job search, he said, maybe this is your higher power giving you some space to live a life without that work, so that you can be better at those boundaries when you find your next spot. And interviewing really started ramping up in January, and connected with a nonprofit here in Atlanta that is fantastic, and got hired as their director of individual giving, and started with them this Monday. And so, now that I'm, kind of back in my happy fundraising place with a nonprofit whose mission I believe in and connects to work I've done in the past, I'm starting that path to build, the life that I envision. This is the first time I've really started a nonprofit job with the tools that I've built in sobriety and through doing the book over the last 4 years. And, I'm excited to bring that to my work, and but also create some more boundaries, and in separating work and non-work life, and and not putting all of my self-worth into the professional side of things. And so I think that's how I don't think I'm living the life that I want to live yet, but I think I'm starting, and I think I have the tools to do that. Whereas 4 years ago, I absolutely.
It's great awareness, though. So many people stick in a job that they don't really love, that doesn't give them energy. And that's awesome that you were able to recognize that and say, it's not a fit. And not that means that you're a failure, or you're, whatever. That's a success to recognize it's not a fit and go and find something that really is. Congratulations.
Totally. Well, thank you. And I just, I had past success in politics, and I thought I wanted to look at that again. And I missed fundraising so much that it showed me, fundraising is a way for me to really use my skill set of storytelling and strategy and engagement, and and I just missed that. And so it's like, I was able to recognize there's nothing wrong with this firm. There's nothing wrong with the vision here, or the people here, or the work here. It's just not what I want to do. And I didn't sit there for 6 months, beating myself up, or projecting onto other people, or making it all about me, and creating drama and all that. I just made a call, and now I'm in the right place. So I'm excited.
Yeah. And Bill says there are a lot of great people here to connect with, and that's for sure. So when we're done with this, I highly recommend you go through the comments and connect with people, and connect with people that they know. There's lots of people here that really talk about radiating real is the hashtag that Nancy Barrows started. And it's, sharing the not so great things that we're experiencing, and that we're feeling, and that we're going through, and supporting each other through that. So I highly recommend, and anyone who's listening to this as a podcast, when it's published later, connect with me on LinkedIn, connect with Jeff on LinkedIn, and let's help each other out, and check in on each other, and support each other.
Absolutely. And I think it's also emblematic of how LinkedIn has changed over the past 5 years or so, where, I think 5 years ago, it was pretty buttoned up, and I see way more people sharing their whole selves here, and I think through the pandemic, especially I think parents are the MVPs of the pandemic. I can't imagine having to, keep all the professional balls in the air and do homeschooling and all of that. But I do think it has shown everybody that disconnecting our work from, having these sort of two silos isn't feasible. And I think from that lens on LinkedIn, I've definitely seen more high performing executive types and the folks that are striving to get those jobs being vulnerable and being authentic and sharing more about themselves than just the business side. And I think that's great.
Yeah. I went live one day because it was back in, I think it was October. My pottery teacher died
Right.
unexpectedly. And I went live. There, it's on YouTube. You can find it. And I'm just like bawling. And I shared it on LinkedIn, on the social media, because what I was so frustrated about is that I have pictures of pottery and stuff, but I didn't really get to know him really deeply. And I don't have any picture of me and Phil, or even a picture of Phil. And it just helped me, awaken me to, even how I want to even more enjoy relationships with people. And that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons that I retired from working for the Navy at my minimum retirement age, is because I was feeling like I was so busy. I was missing these deep conversations, or just getting to know people more than just saying hi. And
Yeah.
I felt like I didn't do that well enough with Phil, but he was just such an amazing person. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm not embarrassed that I was crying, and that's life, right?
Yeah.
And
Totally.
that is important. Yeah. So thanks, Bill, for joining, and he looks forward to connecting with you. And there you go. You
Thanks,
got a
Bill.
new
Definitely.
friend. You got a new friend. So
Yeah. Anybody who's watching, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to make new virtual friends.
yeah, it's awesome. And you live in Atlanta.
I do.
Yeah. So I'm looking at my notes here. What about your mom? I haven't heard you mention your mom.
Oh, my mom's great. I mean, she's kind of the rock of our family. It's funny. I don't have a book right here with me, but the way that the cover of the book is a picture of my family from when I think I'm probably like 7 or so, but it continues onto the spine, and my mom is like on the spine, and so
She's the
you
spine of
know,
the family.
yeah, and I didn't, when we were doing the art and stuff, we were really just looking at the front, and so until I got the book in my hand, I really didn't see the spine, and when I gave her the hard copy, I told her, like, this is, I think it's appropriate that you're on the spine because you held everything together, and she did. And I I was on my way to college. We had literally gone to visit the University of Alabama, where I spent my first 2 years before coming back to Columbia and going to the University of South Carolina. We visited Alabama the weekend before my dad died, and I was pretty set to go there, both because that's what I wanted to do, and I was ready to leave Columbia, but also because that's the last thing that he knew I wanted, and I felt like I needed to follow through with that. So, 6 months after he died, I was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and my mom and my brother were for 2 years in Columbia. I mean, we had our extended family, of course, but she really held our family to our core family together and helped put me through college, and all of that. So
I
she's
commend your mom. I don't have a exact same circumstance, but I am the only parent surviving of my two children. Their dad died in 2019, and there's a certain kind of, I don't know, pressure you feel to be able to stay around. I want to stay healthy, and you're the only
yeah,
parent that your kids have, and it's a lot. It's a big responsibility. So
yeah,
congratulations to your mom for pulling through with
yeah,
that and being.
absolutely. And I think that's where you know I know that I wasn't, I was a kid, and I was
Yeah.
appreciative, but not, I didn't understand at the time, you know, because she was dealing with her own grief and her own trauma, and then being strong for us and making sure that we had what we needed, with Brian in high school and me in college, and making sure, getting him to college. Obviously he was he's a rocket scientist. He's super smart,
Yeah.
but just making sure he had the resources to make the college choices that he wanted to make, and and without loans and things like that. And so, yeah, she's always been great. She got remarried in 2007, and she and her husband live in Columbia and South Carolina, and it's been great to see them more in the past year, as opposed to 2020, where I think I only saw them once, and it was like for 30 minutes sitting 10 feet away from each other. And, and then obviously we didn't do Thanksgiving or Christmas, and it was hard.
Yeah.
It was a hard year, obviously, for everybody, but it was,
I want to ask
20,
you about
21
that.
was nicer. Yeah, 21
Yeah,
was nicer to be able to be together.
I bet. So Mark Lee says he's looking forward to connecting with you. He's just up the road in North Carolina, and he has cousins in Georgia. And then Charlene has to go. Thank you for watching, Charlene. So let me ask you a question. Like COVID happened, you were writing the book, which is traumatic during COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're secluded during COVID. You're recently sober. How did you handle it?
I mean, honestly, I think the book is what, the project from multiple angles really helped me navigate, the pandemic, especially the hardest part, which was 2020, for me personally. When I decided to write the book, I made 3 goals for myself. The first one was, write the whole book, complete the project. This wasn't a situation where I was like, I wanted to, write a proposal and pitch it to publishers. And, I wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it so it would come out in 21 for the 25th anniversary. And I wanted to have some control over the content. And so I just set out to do it. And, before I even looked into publishing, I had a first draft. And so my first goal was write the book, complete the project, at least the first draft, before I even dip my toe in the publishing part. And then the second goal was to get it published. And I found a great company called Scribe Media, which publishes a lot of nonfiction, and, worked with them to publish the book last fall. And then my third goal was just to help as many people as I could. And, myself and at least one other person was my very, very low bar goal, and I know that that's happened. So now it's really just about continuing to share my story and put the book out there as a resource, and, and hopefully it'll help more people. And so those are the goals that I set. Thank you.
It's definitely helping. Yeah. By being on the podcast, having your own podcast, your own other podcast, Scribe Media is pretty good at getting you guys on podcasts too. Cause I'm pretty sure that's probably how they reach out to me all the time. Hey, Emily, you got to meet that person. You got to meet that person. So they seem like,
my team with Scribe was awesome from start to finish. So couldn't recommend them more highly if you're looking to do something in the nonfiction space. But yeah, I mean, just to answer to go back to your original question of, setting those goals, I mean, really took me from Father's Day of 2020 through November 2nd of 2021, when the book was published and became an Amazon bestseller on the first day in multiple categories. And it was the same day the Braves won the World Series, which was awesome.
Wow, Atlanta had a big day.
Yeah, couldn't have anticipated that at all. But it really took me. It was my pandemic, and it got all of my energy in the pandemic, and was great. Like I don't really know it was meant to happen that way. I just don't know what I would have done, because those first few months were a struggle, especially raising money for a nonprofit and feeling like, every day your work was making sure that your teammates didn't get pay cuts or laid off. I mean, those first 3 months were incredibly stressful. And, once we got to a good place fundraising wise going into June, I had a little more energy to think about other things. And then, again, I just had that epiphany on Father's Day that, like, I need to go back to this idea of, what would I see if my life flashed before my eyes, and really start to build it out. And I made this, I love dates and I love time, and my book really plays with time from that perspective. But I just made this big Excel sheet of like 150 or so things from my life that could be a chapter. And then I narrowed it down to about 120 that I was able to figure out the actual dates, because the dates themselves are the chapter headings. It's not like chapter 1, chapter 2. It's the actual date. And then I narrowed that down to what's in the book and what I ended up writing. And and it was a great way to do it, because it wasn't linear. It gave me the opportunity to, if after work I wanted to write about this thing, then I just dug into that. Or I left some of the harder stuff till the end, which I finished my first draft Thanksgiving of 2020. And but it was a really approachable way to come to it, where each chapter is kind of a standalone short story, and it's organized in a way that has a story arc for sure, and reiterates the points I'm trying to make. But I was able to tighten all that up, to make sure it connected well and the right order for things to be in. But when I was writing it, I wasn't thinking about the order. I was just thinking about telling the story inside of that chapter, and it was just week by week I did a little, and did a little more as I got into the fall. And because the original idea was like, I wanted it to be out by my dad's anniversary in February, which I know now, knowing what it takes to actually publish a physical book, that was silly. But it got me, that tight timeline made me just focus so hard on that. And then when I found Scribe at the beginning of 2021, I did a crowdfunding campaign, the first time I've really used my fundraising skills, for myself, but did a crowdfunding campaign to help fund the book. And that was sort of the first part of the year. And then between the end of February and mid-April was the second drafting, and sort of locking that in, and then going into the publishing process. And so it was a great experience, and it it sort of was my pandemic. So
what's next for you then? Because it's probably like this big thing, and then now you're on shows and everything, but like, what's next? It seems like a big goal like that is something that helps you keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think the next, I like I said, I'm thrilled about my new job. I'm ready to dig in there. And but I think the podcast is Suicide Survival Stories podcast will be more of a focus. I will do some book specific things, but it's hard to sit here and say I wrote a memoir, but I don't want it to be about me. But I kind of don't. Like, I'm more of a behind the scenes person, and so I created the podcast to be in conjunction with the book, so that we can tell other people's stories. And so I think most of my effort moving forward will go into the podcast and figuring out how to make time for that, in addition to my new job, and grow that. And but just to continue to speak up about suicidal ideation specifically, because I think that over the past 20 years, for in wonderful ways, the conversation about mental health in general, and anxiety and depression, is a much more visible, accessible conversation. But even still, until I was a couple months into writing this book, I'd been sharing about my anxiety and depression and those struggles on social media, and being transparent and authentic about that for a decade. But until a couple months into writing this book, I had never said suicidal ideation connected to myself publicly. I obviously knew that I needed to because of what I was doing, but that's really my focus is changing the stigma around suicidal ideation. Because if we don't, again, it just goes back to that idea of, if we don't talk about suicidal ideation, it's just going to be poison. And so, it is, even if it might be awkward for the person we're talking to, if it's staying in our head, it is far more poisonous. If I'm telling you that I'm struggling with suicidal ideation, that is far healthier for the person struggling than them not telling you.
Yeah.
And so that's where, but I think that's where society has to move, right? Because I think there are fears, and legitimate fears, about the receiver of that information overreacting, and so there's a balance there, right? Because I feel like I've been visible enough to this point to where I don't think anybody's going to overreact if I say I'm struggling, whether I say it publicly or one-to-one. But some people may really overreact, and and take them to the emergency room or whatever. And obviously there are different situations, right?
Yeah.
Like nothing is monolithic. So
Should
if
they not
someone
take
is,
them to the emergency room?
this is the spectrum of situations, right? There
Yeah.
are some situations where danger is apparent,
Mhm.
right? If danger is apparent, then yeah, of course. But if
Okay.
I'm sitting down with you on a couch and just saying,
Yeah.
here's how I'm feeling, I don't know what to do with this, I really wanted to talk about it, like scooping me up and taking me to the hospital is an overreaction, right?
Yeah.
But if it's, if the person speaking is not well visibly, if they're manic, if they're, threatening, yes. I mean, I think it's, I
All
think
right.
it's, it when you see it. And I think it comes back to that, like, not making it about you, right?
Yeah.
If you can see, because of their words or tones or action, that they are in danger, then yes, right, help them. But don't project danger onto them because what they're saying is scaring you.
Got
Right.
it. Got it. That's a
So
great way to end it, because I'm sorry, but we're kind of
yeah,
out of time.
absolutely.
But let's talk about, let's see, this is how people can follow your book on Instagram and Twitter at DFKY book, right?
Yep.
And then you also have this one, which is a share with suicide survival stories, right? That's for
Yep.
Instagram and Twitter. And then this is where they can listen to your podcast too, and there's some resources there.
Yeah, the website, if you go to suicidesurvivalstories.org, it gives
Mhm.
you the option to, if you want to buy the book, go to Amazon, or if you don't do Amazon, we're in the Ingram Spark catalog, so you could go to your local independent bookstore, which I recommend and support, and just ask them, and they can order the book for you. It's not going to be on the shelves because a lot of people have to request it before they put it on the shelves.
Yeah.
But they can, it's in the catalog that they use to order from, and they can order it for you. But you can also buy it on Amazon, or Barnes & Noble, different places. But if you go to suicidesurvivalstories.org, you get that option of going into the full website or going to buy the book. And so on the website, it's pretty simple. There's a section on the book with some selections, and there's a section for the podcast, and then there's a section which you have here for prevention resources. And so, and if there are resources that we can add, please email us at share@suicidesurvivalstories.org. And we're working right now to do a big update to the resources page. So
thank you very much for sharing your story and for writing this book, because definitely I know it's going to help people, and I know that it takes courage to come forward with your story, and I just appreciate everything that you're doing. I hope that you're proud of yourself, because you should be.
I'm trying to be.
You should be.
I take cues from other people. So thank you for saying that. And, and thank you for having me. It's been great to talk to you and share. And I'm looking forward to connecting with folks through LinkedIn who have taken the time to listen.
Yeah, you made a lot of new friends tonight. So hopefully you can set up some networking calls with them and just get to know this community. There's a lot of people that are very supportive that watch my show and other shows as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily.
Onward Live is sponsored by Emily Harmon Coaching and Consulting. Visit my website, emilyharmon.com, to learn more about me and my coaching programs. I'd love to help you create a life you love living. Remember, every adversity is our own personal university. Sometimes the lessons are difficult, and we must learn from our experiences. Vulnerability is your superpower. You are lovable and worthy. And we discuss these topics and more because professional is personal. Thank you for joining us and engaging with me and my guest. I look forward to